Hi, my name is Anjanette Bunce. I am the lead interface developer at JSTOR, and I want to talk to you about our site and how we made it responsive. As we've been talking about, and as is obvious just by looking around the room and walking out in the world, mobile usage is on the rise. These are some stats from our site from 2010 to the present, and we did some forecasting based on our stats through May and usage patterns. And you can see that early on, most of our mobile traffic was non-smartphone and smartphone, very little tablet usage. As you've been hearing today in the other mobile session and this mobile session, tablets are really, really rapidly rising. We've also seen the decline in the non-smartphones as more people have smartphones. So we looked at, and I'm not going to go over this very much because it's really been covered by my colleagues here. We looked at a lot of different options. The mobile app was one possibility, and we have done some beta iterates of mobile apps. They're really good for a targeted use, but they're limited, as people have covered, to specific devices. So then we looked at doing a mobile site, and we wouldn't have the device issue. More people could access it, but it would require a completely separate development stream and maintenance stream, and we weren't sure that we really could support that. We were also concerned about that divergence that can happen where you go to look at something on your mobile phone and you can't find it. You know that you know where it is on the regular site, and then you look for the View Full Site button. We also considered the full responsive redesign. As Jean was talking about, this takes a lot of time and effort, and we weren't really sure if we would be able to do that quickly and support the rest of our development streams. So we looked around for another option, and we came up with a responsive retrofit. We wanted to see if we could utilize our existing code base, our existing site, and just add a little bit of CSS and JavaScript and see where that could get us. One of the things that we had working for us is that we do have a lot of site-wide design patterns, little rebuildable Legos of code that we already use to populate and build our pages. So we could really reduce the redesign effort by just restyling those particular pieces and having that flow across the entire site. One of the things that's really important to JSTOR is accessibility. We invest a lot of time, effort, testing in making our site accessible. We do screen reader testing, we do usability testing, and we really were concerned about being able to have this accessibility translate to mobile devices. We also wanted to have consistent functionality. We didn't want to worry about having to put out a new feature on our main site and then have to have the mobile catch up or vice versa. So for us, a retrofit had the most impact in the shortest amount of time and would reach the widest audience. So the rest of the team that couldn't be here is represented up here. I thought it was really important to talk about the team because it was really the collaboration of all of these different disciplines that made our responsive design possible. We had product management, Zach here, representing the business, user experience, representing users, visual design, developers, and testing. One of the things that we did when we started thinking about responsive design was we started talking about devices. How would we test this? How would we know if we had succeeded? We used an article by Brad Frost to sort of guide us in deciding how to choose devices. One of the things that we wanted to consider, we couldn't test on, there's so many devices, we couldn't test on all devices. So we looked at finding representative functionality, sizes, that sort of thing. We looked on eBay to kind of keep costs down. We also looked at options that we could use Wi-Fi so we didn't have to get data plans for everything. So these were kind of ways that we were able to do it without spending a lot of money. We also would have device jams where we had people come and bring their different devices that they had and do testing that way. So once we had all these devices, we wanted to look and see where were we at currently, because our site would come up on a mobile device. So we started with that. We took all of the new devices and we started testing and seeing what worked. Does a PDF download on this device? How does this reflow? What currently is working? And we used that to create a baseline of functionality. So then later when we were doing bug fixes and bug testing, we already knew where we were at. Then we started looking at what could we make better? What were things that were frustrating as you got on those smaller resolutions? And we looked to identify anything that would keep us from launching right away. One thing that I didn't mention when we talked about, we launched in August, we did the entire thing in 8 weeks, which is pretty nice for a redesign. And that was really possible because of those design patterns that we had in place and sort of that underlying CSS framework. Another thing that we looked at was breakpoints. We wanted to look at where things were going to break, where things needed to reflow, and use that instead of like static set out, this device has this, breaks at this point. You can kind of find that on the web, but it's really better to think about your content and where do you need to set those breakpoints. I really like this quote by Brad Frost. Mobile users will do everything and anything desktop users do, provided it's presented in a usable way. And we really took this to heart when we did our retrofit. Our strategy was basically to simplify, to really look at optimizing the experience, but we didn't want to just take things away, as often happens when you get to that small screen. And we really wanted to make sure that users could have what they needed when they needed it, and really do that prioritization that people have been talking about. What content is the most important to users? And as I've already wanted to reuse what we already had and sort of limit new development. So let me show you some pictures of our site and our design. So some things that we did, we worked on the homepage, obviously. This homepage, if you go to it, this is the homepage when we launched our books project. Our homepage changes frequently, and so we do a little mini mobile redesign for the homepage each time we do that. With this, as you shrink your resolution, the image scales. When you're on mobile, you actually have a different image that's more appropriate to that context. For our navigation, we have sort of our main navigation on the left, and we have some support navigation on the right. When you get to a smaller resolution, it's really small to hit those login links and the contact and the help, so we made those bigger. We also stacked them vertically to fit better in the frame. When we got down to a phone, we actually had to make some more serious decisions. We decided that browse was not a prominent workflow on the phone, and we took away that as a navigation. That's one of the few things that we did where we actually sort of took something away. None of the pages are taken away. You can still browse, but it wasn't a prominent workflow, and we really needed to think about what should go in that navigation. We also changed, we don't have the login link anymore. We have this get access, because when you're on the go on your phone, people aren't always thinking about, do I log in? It's logging in on JSTOR is not necessarily the main way that people get access. They get access through their institution, through being on an institutional network, IP authentication. So we really wanted to think about users being in a different context and how do they need to get access. So that's why we made that change there. The right rail is a very prominent part of our current design. So it was something that we really needed to think about how to handle. Traditionally, in a lot of responsive web, people will stack things. And so it's a common approach to take like your right rail content and put it underneath. But we have a lot of really important content in there, and a lot of our publishers put information there. So we had to think about how to handle it. As we got smaller, we looked at scaling things. The images scale, things reflow. And when you get to the phone where you have less space and less options, we did sort of a drawer effect. You can click on the little button, the arrow button, or anywhere actually in there and bring out the drawer of the right rail. So I was talking earlier about the get access button instead of the login. So on your desktop and on tablet, when you hit login, you come here, and logging into your MyJStore account is a pretty typical experience on your desktop. And then we also have this login, this institution finder to kind of help you out if you're not figuring out how you can have access. On the phone, because we knew that it was going to be more important for people to be able to get that institutional access and to really have that more prominent, we switched it up. So that actually becomes the first link. And we also wanted to have, instead of displaying all of that information that was on the previous, we did the expand collapse. And then it's easy to open them up and get to what you need. Overlays are notoriously tricky on mobile. If you probably experienced that if you've ever tried to use different forms and different pages that people have not optimized their site for mobile. So on the desktop, it's in context close to the trigger. On tablet, we tie them to the left. And on phone, we give it a wider width and it's more prominent. You can get to your content. Another thing that we thought about was how to deal with your real estate, how to think about how your content is going to move around or take up space as you have a smaller resolution. So here, the two things that I'm going to talk about are the sort of the journal link here and the tool set over there. Need a little. So reflow, kind of typical responsive solution. And then when we get to the smaller phone, we do again the expand collapse. The one thing that's interesting here that we did a little bit differently is we pulled out the view PDF link. This is a really common thing. We wanted people to be able to get to the article in the PDF right away, not bury it into an expand collapse. So since we knew that was a prominent workflow, we prioritized that and put that higher. So we did start out with mobile as a project where it was a specific thing that we did. We had a small core team that worked on it. But going forward and after our launch, we really wanted to make sure that mobile was a habit, that it was something that was thought about day in and day out as part of our regular process. So now when we do any design projects, any development projects, we think about the mobile considerations. We make incremental changes. We look at different little pieces. We don't have to change everything all at once. And as Jean mentioned, continually improving performance is key. We also, Jean also brought up mobile first, and that's something that we try to consider. One of the nice things about mobile first is the idea is that you're constrained on a small phone by space, and so you have to focus and prioritize and make really specific decisions. I also wanted to show a little bit more of our usage trends. We've already kind of covered that mobile usage has been increasing. Since our responsive redesign, we've noticed that the mobile users are accessing more content and they are staying on pages longer. So we consider that a big success. A greater percentage of mobile users are accessing JSTOR on tablets, and we believe that they are also logging on and getting on their institutional networks more. They don't seem to have as many turn-away kind of experiences. We're also noticing that while the majority of our access and searches are all still on desktop, the rate of searching from mobile devices is increasing. So it's definitely something for us to keep an eye on and really think about how to improve that search experience from the small screens. So the takeaways that I want to kind of go over are really consider your content. Consider your unique content, your unique site, the experience that you want people to have. And you might not need, don't just take the practices for responsive and just do what is written. You really need to think about what your content is and what's the experience on your site. and make the decisions with users in mind. Do user testing, do talk to users, find out what specific cases they have. One of the things, so we didn't do an app early on as our solution, but I did want to talk a little, just briefly, that we haven't ruled out apps, because we really want to do apps if there's a specific use case, a specific thing that users need. Like if a user is in a lecture, and a student is in a lecture, and they want to be able to quickly add articles from the lecture in there, that might be a good reason to have an app. Things like that. Small changes can make a difference. You don't need to do a big redesign in order to improve the user experience. Test on real devices. There is, a lot of people talk about responsive, you can do it all on the desktop, but there's something different about the experience that you have on a phone or on a tablet. It's more than just what's visually there. There's also a tactile experience that you need to consider in making your designs. And iterate, iterate, iterate. We're very agile at JSTOR, and it's very important to always be thinking about improving and what's next. I have a few resources for you all. The 2 books that are at the top have been mentioned already by Luke and Ethan. Responsive retrofitting is an article that came out recently by Ben Callahan, and it talks about the same kind of thing that I was talking about, how to make small changes if you're not able to do a full-on redesign. And it also talks about how to evaluate if your site is a candidate for that. Brad Frost has a lot of great examples and resources. This is responsive, is all about different patterns. And there's also a mobile best practices site that he put together. Another way to kind of get up and running is to utilize frameworks. There's frameworks like Skeleton, Foundation, and Bootstrap that can help you with CSS, JavaScript, and some breakpoint kind of guidelines. This is the article I talked about earlier about testing on real devices and how to make that happen. MobiTest is an interesting tool where you can do mobile performance testing, and you go to their website, you put in your information, they actually run the test on real devices, and you can get that feedback. And Adobe Edge Inspect is another way of doing that testing and working with different devices. So, thank you.